Bright Duty. Every student matters.
Hello dear students, welcome to another lecture. In this class, we are going to continue with chapter number 7 of class 11th literature reader Nagaland Board, which is the Verger. So far in the first part of the chapter, we have read how Albert Edward, who had been serving in the church St. Peter's for the past 16 years, was suddenly asked to leave his job, to dismiss himself from his services just because he did not know how to do them. So let us read further what happened thereafter. So, when Albert Edward, with his usual politeness, had closed the church door behind the Visar and the two church wardens, he could not sustain the air of unruffled dignity with which he had borne the blow inflicted upon him, and his lips quivered. So far, Albert Edward, as we had seen, he accepted his dismissal with a lot of politeness, with a lot of dignity. But as soon as he closed the door of the church behind him and nobody could see him, he could not sustain, he could not continue with that dignity that, he had shown inside the church. And now the blow inflicted upon him, the impact of what had happened turned on him and his lips started quivering. Our lips quiver when we are almost on the verge of crying, when we are emotional about something. He walked slowly back to the vestry and hung up on its proper peg its Verger's gown. He sighed as he thought of all the grand funerals and smart weddings it had seen. He tidied everything up, put on his coat and hat in hand, walked down the aisle. He locked the church door behind. So he went to the vestry, he took out his coat, he hung it properly on its peg, on the hook on which he would hang his gown every day. He thought about all the funerals, all the weddings he had attended in that Verger's gown. He cleaned everything in that room, he took his coat, he took his hat, and then he started walking down aisle out of the church. He locked the church door behind him. He strolled across the square, but deep in his sad thoughts, he did not take the street that led him home, where a nice strong cup of tea awaited. He took the wrong turn. So he started strolling back home. He started walking back home. He was so sad that he did not straight away go back home where he knew that a cup of tea was waiting for him. Rather, he took a wrong turn. He walked slowly along. His heart was heavy. He did not know what he should do with himself. He did not fancy the notion of going back to domestic service after being his own master for so many years. For the Visar and church wardens could say what they liked. It was he that had run St. Peter's Neville Square. He could scarcely demean himself by accepting it. So he was very slowly walking back home. His heart was very heavy. He did not know what he was going to do now. He could not take on a domestic service. That is, he did not think he could go to house, from house to house, offering his services of the church, because he has been his own master for many years. He believed that no matter what the new Visar or the church wardens might think, but he was sure that it was him who single-handedly took care of the church for the past 16 years. And now he just could not demean himself. He could not insult himself by accepting that situation. He had saved a tidy sum, but not enough to live on without doing something. And life seemed to cost more every year. He had never thought to be troubled with such questions. The Vergers of St. Peter's, like the popes in Rome, were there for life. He had often thought of the pleasant reference the Visar would make in his sermon and even sung the first Sunday after his death to the long and faithful service, and the exemplary character of the late Verger, Albert Edward Foreman. He sighed. So he thought that he did not even have that much money that he could live without doing anything. And every year the expenses were only increasing, so that was troubling him. He never thought that all these questions were going to come into his mind. He always believed that just like the Pope of the Rome, a verger's duty is going to be forever, that nobody could take away his duties from him. He also thought that this new Vizier was going to praise him once he will die. He will talk about how beautiful his character was and how faithful this man was. Late Verger Albert Edward Foreman. So he even went on to the future where he thought that when he would die, this Vizier was going to talk very highly of him. But now nothing of that sort could happen, so he sighed deeply. He took a deep breath. Albert Edward was a non-smoker and a total abstainer, but with a certain latitude. That is to say, he liked a glass of beer with his dinner, and when he was tired, he enjoyed a cigarette. So, though he was a non-smoker, he was an abstainer. He controlled himself and he, refrained from any bad habits, but with a certain latitude. There were certain eased restrictions, there were certain things that he had eased upon himself. For example, he liked to have a glass of beer with dinner, and when he was tired, he would at times smoke a cigarette. It occurred to him now that one would comfort him, and since he did not carry them, he looked about him for a shop where he could buy a pack. So now he was so worried that he actually was looking for a shop nearby where he could buy himself a packet of cigarettes. He did not at once see one and walked on a little. It was a long street with all sorts of shops in it, but there was not a single one where you could buy cigarettes. So he did not see a shop around him, so he continued to walk. He continued walking. There were multiple shops he could see, but not even a single shop was there where he could buy cigarettes. That's strange, said Albert to himself. To make sure, he walked right up the street again. No, there was no doubt about it. He stopped and looked reflectively up and down. So he found that very strange. How could there be no shop in that street with cigarettes? He walked up the street and then he stopped. He reflected. He started thinking and started browsing through the street up and down. I can't be the only man as walks along this street and wants a fag, he said. I should not wonder, but what a fellow might do very well with a little shop here. Tobacco and sweets, So he thought that it was very strange. He was the only man who was walking in that street. And he thought, how come there is nobody who walks in that street who wants a fag? Who wants a cigarette, who wants to smoke. So he started wondering that if a man who would open a small shop here selling tobacco and sweets would actually run very well. He gave a sudden start, and that suddenly gave him an idea. That's an idea, he said. Strange how things come to you when you least expect it. And he started wondering that it is at times very strange when you don't expect to hear something and suddenly you get an idea. He turned, walked home and had his tea. You're very silent this afternoon, Albert, his wife remarked. I am thinking, he said. So he walked home, he had his tea with his wife, but he did not say much. So when his wife asked him why he was so quiet, Albert said that I am thinking. He considered the matter from every point of view, and next day he went along the street and by good luck found a little shop to let that looked as though it would exactly suit. So he thought about this possibility, about this idea from every perspective. And next day he went to the same street and he was lucky enough to find a good shop for himself, a shop that according to him suited his needs very well. 24 hours later, he had taken it, and when a month after that he left St. Peter's Neville Square forever, Albert Edward Foreman set up in business as a tobacconist and a news agent. His wife said it was a dreadful come down after being Verger of St. Peter's, but he answered that you had to move with the times. The church was not what it was, and henceforth he was going to render unto Caesar what was. So, 24 hours later, he finalized that shop for himself, and after a month, when he had left St. Peter's Neville Square altogether, he started himself as a business. He became a tobacconist and a news agent. So he started into a business of selling tobacco. His wife thought of it as a very strange transformation because according to her, he served in a church. He was a verger. He was a part of the church, which is a very noble profession. So from the profession of a church, from a profession of a verger, the profession that he had taken up now as a tobacconist was completely changed, was completely new. But the verger, Albert Edward, made his wife understand that one has to change with time, that the church he worked earlier is not the same church now, and now he has to render unto Caesar what was Caesar's. He referred to as Julius Caesar also, that one has to start thinking about oneself now. One has to start believing in things that would give them good hopes and profits in future. Albert Edward did very well. He did so well that in a year or so, it struck him that he might take a second shop and put a manager in. He looked for another long street that had not got a tobacconist in it, and when he found it and a shop to let, took it and stopped it. This was a success story. So within a year, his business ran so well that he actually thought of buying another shop for himself and giving in a manager who could run the second shop. He again walked down a street where he did not see a tobacconist. He set up a shop there, and within a year, that shop also turned out to be a great success. Then it occurred to him that if he could run two, he could run half a dozen. So he began walking about London, and whenever he found a long street that had no tobacconist and a shop to let, in the course of 10 years he had acquired no less than 10 shops, and he was making money hand over fist. He went round to all of them himself every Monday, collected the wheat stakings and took them to the bank. Then it occurred to him that if he could run two shops, he could run a dozen shops as well. And so he started walking the streets of London, and wherever he came across the street which had no tobacconist, and he found himself a shop, he took that shop and he set that up. In 10 years, he had 10 shops under his name, each of them running very well. And every Monday he himself would go to each shop to collect the money and deposit the money in the bank. And as the writer says, he was making money hand over fist. This is a phrase just to tell you that he was making hell lot of money. One morning when he was paying in a bundle of notes and a heavy bag of silver, the cashier told him that the manager would like to see him. He was shown into an office and the manager shook hands with him. So one morning when he was depositing the bundle of money that he had collected from his shops, the cashier told that the manager wanted to meet him, and he was shown into the manager's room. And the manager shook hands with him. So they both shook hands. Mr. Foreman, I wanted to have a talk to you about the money you've got on deposit with us. Do you know exactly how much it is? So the manager said that the reason why I wanted to meet you was because I wanted to talk to you about the money that you have deposited with us. Do you know exactly how much money it is? Not within a pound or two, sir, but I've got a pretty rough idea. So the foreman, Albert, said that I don't know exactly, but I just have a rough idea. The manager said that apart from what you paid in this morning, it's a little over 30,000 pounds. That's a very large sum to have on deposit, and I should have thought you'd do better to invest it. So the manager said that your money, apart from what you deposited in the morning, we have not counted it yet. But your sum, your deposit amount for 30,000 pounds, which is a very huge amount. And I would suggest that you think of investing your money somewhere. I would want to take no risk, sir. I know it is safe in the bank. Albert said that I don't want to take a risk. I know that my money is safe in the bank. You need not have the least anxiety. We will make you out a list of absolutely gift-edged securities. They'll bring you in a better rate of interest than we can possibly afford to give you. The manager said that you don't need to worry the least. We are going to offer to you. We are going to list down the best securities. Gilt-edged security means those securities which have no risk in them at all. By investing in these securities, you'll be able to get a better rate of interest than we at the bank can offer. A troubled look settled on Mr. Foreman's distinguished face. I've never had anything to do with stocks and shares, and I'd have to leave it all in your hands, he said. So Albert said that I do not know anything about the stocks or the shares. He looked very troubled. He said that I would want to leave everything in your hands. The manager smiled. He said, we'll do everything. All you will have to do next time you come in is just to sign the transfers. So he said, you don't worry, we will take care of everything. You just come and you have to sign so that your money can be transferred to the securities. I could do that all right, said Albert uncertainly. But how should I know what I was signing? So Albert said that is fine. I can surely sign what you want me to, but how would I come to know what I was signing? What is it that you're making me sign for? I suppose you can read, said the manager, a trifle sharply. The manager said that should not be a problem. You can read whatever you are signing on. Mr. Foreman gave him a disarming smile. So Mr. Foreman gave him a harmless smile. He had a very innocent smile on his face. He said, well, sir, that's just it. I can't. I know it sounds funny, but there it is. I can't read or write, only me name. And I only learned to do that when I went into business. So he said to the manager that this might seem funny to you, but I don't know how to read and write. The only thing I know is how to write my name. And that too I learned when I got myself into business. The manager was so surprised that he jumped up from his chair. That's the most extraordinary thing I've heard. The manager said that that's the most surprising thing I have ever heard. You see, it's like this, sir. I've never had the opportunity until it was too late, and then somehow I could not. I got obstinate like. So the foreman, Albert, continued to explain to the manager that this is how it is. I never had the opportunity to learn how to read and write, and when I got one, I was very obstinate. I did not feel like learning it. The manager stared at him as though he were a prehistoric monster. So the manager was looking at Albert as if he was looking at some early man. And do you mean to say that you built up this important business and amassed a fortune of 30,000 pounds without being able to read and write? Good God, man, what would you be now if you had been able? So the manager said that, are you trying to say that you built this wonderful business for yourself? You've gathered so much of money in your account and all without knowing how to read or write? He says, what would you have done if you knew how to do that? I can tell you that, sir, said Mr. Foreman, a little smile on his still aristocratic features. I'd be the verger of St. Peter Nevis. So he said that if I would have known how to read and write, I would be the verger of St. Peter. So with this, my dear students, we come to the end of this wonderful tale of Albert Edward. We read how he was a verger of St. Peter's Nevis Square for 16 years. He loved his job so much that every day he took specific pains to iron, to fold his verger's gown. He took pride in the job he did. The verger gowns that were of no longer use to him, he did not throw them, he did not discard them. Rather, he very neatly put them in his drawer of the wardrobe. We learned that it was a christening ceremony, post which the new Vicar of St. Peter's called him to his room. The two church wardens were accompanying him, and they expressed their surprise over the fact that the verger, that is Albert Edward, who had been serving in the church for the past 16 years, did not know how to read and write. Albert said that the old Vicar was already aware of it, and he felt that education did not do any good to anyone. The new Vicar, who was a modern person, believed in other way round, and he said to the verger that we give you 3 months to learn how to read and write. If you are able to do that, wonderful, you can continue being the verger. But if you cannot, then you have to leave. The verger was obviously very proud of himself, and he could not just handle or tolerate the new Vicar insulting him like that. So he accepted his resignation, and he said that as soon as you are able to find somebody in my place, I will leave, because I don't think I can now learn how to read it. Now he started walking back home. He was obviously very sad and disappointed. And we have been told that although he was a non-smoker, but at times when he was worried, he liked to have a cigarette. So rather than going straight to home, he took the other turn and he was on a road trying to find a shop where he could buy for himself a pack of cigarettes. To his surprise, the entire street, there was no tobacconist. And it was then when this idea struck to him that if he himself opened the shop, that would pay him a good amount of money. So he bought for himself a shop, and that shop ran so well that in a year he was in a position to buy and run another shop. After 2 successful shops, he thought if he could run 2, he could run a dozen other shops as well. So he started walking down the streets of London, and wherever he found himself a shop without a tobacconist on that street, he bought and he ran. Within a course of 10 years, he had almost 10 shops under his name, all of them doing wonderingly well. One day when he came to the bank to deposit his amount that he would collect from the managers of all his shops every Monday, the manager told him that he had 30,000 pounds in his deposit and that he should think of, investing them somewhere. Albert told the manager he did not know anything about investment or securities, and he also said that he did not know what to do with it. The manager said that everything would be taken care of by the bank and he only had to sign. Albert said he could sign, but how would he know what he was signing? The manager, with utmost ease, said that he could always read. And this is when Albert disclosed to him that he could not read or write. and that he had run the entire business all by himself without knowing anything but how to write his name. When the manager asked him what he would have done if he knew how to read and write, the foreman said that he would have been the verger of St. Peter's. Because if he knew how to read and write, he would never have left his services to be the verger, and this fortune would not have taken place in his. So you see, my dear students, at times you do not know where and how your luck is going to lead you. This happened exactly with our Verger. He made fortunes when he thought he had no hope left in him. Let us now move on to the exercises. How long had Albert Edward Foreman been Verger at St. Peter's when he was asked to step down? For 16 years he was the Verger. Why was the verger asked to step down, and do you think that was a fair decision? He was asked to step down because according to the new Vicar, he did not know how to read and write, and he considered it important. Do you think it is fair? No, we do not think it is fair at all, because even without knowing how to read and write, he has been taking care of all his responsibilities with utmost care. And for 16 years he had been doing his services on them. What was Foreman's reply when the Vicar asked him to learn to read and write? So when the Vicar asked him to learn to read and write, the Foreman very politely and respectfully accepted that and said that he does not feel the need to learn to read and write now, and so he will accept leaving the church. Why had Foreman never learned to read or write? How had he managed in life? So he never thought of learning to read and write because according to him, education did not play much of a role. And he managed well. He took the help of his wife in writing letters, and just by looking at the pictures that came in the newspapers, he could get to know what took place in the world. What did the verger do when he left the church after his meeting with the Vicar? So when the verger left the church after his meeting with the Vicar, he took the street of the church, the wrong street. He was looking for a shop where he could get himself a pack of tobacco. What had Foreman done before he became a verger, and why did he not want to go back to the employment? So we have read that the Foreman was a butler before he became the verger, and he did not want to go back to this employment because he, after working at this church as a verger, was his own master, and he did not want to work for anybody else. What happened in the course of 10 years? So in a course of 10 years, the verger, Mr. Foreman, managed to become the owner of 10 shops and amassed an amount of 30,000 pounds. Okay. Albert Foreman became rich and successful despite knowing how to read and write. Does this disprove the importance of reading and writing? Now, this is something which is a very general, note for you to ponder and think upon. Albert Foreman became extremely rich without knowing how to read and write. So, do you think it is not important for one to read and write? So, you have to express your own opinions and write a note on the character and appearance of Albert Foreman. So we have been told that Albert Foreman had been working in the church for 16 years. He was tall, he was tan, and he was a very, proud man. He loved his job of the verger like anything. The way he took care of his verger's coat speaks a lot about that. We've also read that he did not think it important to learn how to read and write. It was only until he felt demeaned by the new Vicar did he think of leaving his services at the verger, and then also he struck with this idea of starting a business for himself. He obviously had a great sense of business and ended up making fortune with that. And we read how in a course of 10 years he ended up gathering a sum of 30,000 pounds, that too without knowing how to do them well. Imagine there is a chance meeting between the Vicar and Albert Foreman some years later. What would the reaction be? So again, this is something which you have to imagine, that the Visar and Albert Foreman met each other after some years. How do you think they would react when they meet? So this again requires you to think and your creativity to answer the question. So with this, my dear students, we come to the end of chapter 7, the Verger. I hope you enjoyed the chapter, you understood the chapter well.